Okay, I'm going to have a go at an allium today. Nice and loose. I absolutely love doing loose flowers. And they're just starting to come out in my garden. So I'm wetting the whole of the background. I'm not drawing anything on. Just going to go for it. Plenty of water there. And get my round number 10. I'm just going to quickly go through the colours. I've got a dab of green gold, a dab of sap green, a dab of a student quality turquoise because it's transparent, a dab of Windsor violet, and a big blob of cobalt violet. So cobalt violet is opaque, and it's important that I use opaque when I'm doing this, so you'll see why as I go through. So I'm loading my brush up with a bit of water. I'm going to come into the green gold and just start to pop that on. I'm going to get a nice loose background. We don't want this background to be too strong because we're going to take the purple of the alliums over it. So make sure you're loading your brush up with water. And we're going sort of semi-abstract. It could be foliage in the background. We could have a few more alliums in the background. Green gold's a lovely colour. And you can make something similar with a pre-mixed green and a yellow if you haven't got a green gold. It's an artist quality colour, so not everybody has that. So I'm then going to dab into the sap green with a loaded brush. Just take a bit of a variety in. So I'm just sweeping that through. This is our nice background colours. Nice and random. Rinsing my brush, loading it with water, dabbing into the turquoise. The student quality turquoise, a lot of them are transparent, and that works really well when you're learning if you stick with one thing. Transparent means it's very hard to make mud with transparent. With opaques, you can make mud quite easily. So I'm just flipping some of that through. Nice and random, thinking foliage. Okay, so then I'm going to swap down to a number 6. I'm going to come into my cobalt violet. So make sure I've got that nicely loaded. And I'm going to start to sweep a shape in. And you can instantly see what it's doing. It's pushing the colour away. Because it's opaque, it will push the other colours away. So it's a way to get that sort of dandelion clock head with that background without having to use masking fluid, and get a really nice loose effect. What you have got to be careful of is yellow and purple make brown. It's your complementary colours, so you've got to sweep it in and then let go. So we're sweeping, but we're not mixing up and down on the paper. You will just get some really nice effects starting to happen. This is going to give us the base of the allium. You're just stroking outwards. It's still really nice and wet, so I've got plenty of time. If you haven't got cobalt violet, because it is an artist quality colour and it is quite expensive, then you could try making a purple and mixing some Chinese white with it, because Chinese white is opaque and that would do a very similar thing. It's about just working with what you've got. So I'm just sweeping in a few more bits. I'm just going to dab in, you can see here, into this Windsor Violet. That's just going to give me a bit of a variety of tones. So I've still got a little bit of Cobalt Violet on the brush, and this is now a more wispier effect. I'm just going to bring some of that through. Nice variety of tone. So there's not too much on the brush, just working it through. Now brush a little bit of a rinse. I'm just going to take a little bit out here, so I'm just dabbing off on a bit of kitchen towel and taking a little bit of the paint out. It's got a little bit of a puddle, and that's just going to stop that going any further. So at this point now, if we wanted to have some sort of distant alliums in here, we could just dab in with a little bit more of the Cobalt Violet. Just create a few. Tends to work better in odds, so odd numbers. So if you go 3 or 5 or 7, and try to make it so they're not going to end up in a pattern. So I've done 2 this side like that, 1 that side, which could very then similar be there, but I'm not going to put it there because I don't want it to become a pattern. So I'm going to put it just behind that one. I want it to look natural. So the ones that are further forward need to be bigger. And I'm just dabbing on. That's enough really for it to hold as something in the distance. Doesn't have to be any more. You can also still dab into a little bit of the dark if you want to put a bit of dark within them. Then I'm going to come back into the sap green. So I've dried my brush off and I've picked up some of the sap green, and then I just want to bring in a stem. So this paper isn't dry, it's still wet, so it's going to have a nice soft stem. And I can do similar, pop in a few stems, just thinking about this background. Dab into the sap green again, just create a bit of foliage, so I'm just sweeping through at the bottom. So we've got a bit of a base. Got these stems coming in here. If they start to disappear, just put them back in again. I'm just playing with the paint a little bit really. You don't want anything too obvious. If it starts to dry a little bit, then your best bet is to take either a damp brush to it to blend, and that's nearly wet but not very wet, or just taking a little bit more paint. So it's just watermarking there. I'm just going to stop that with, it's a nearly dry brush really, just blending that a little bit. Just to stop that going any further. Okay, I'm going to dry that off now. Okay, so that's nicely dry now. We're at the point now where it's looking really nice and you've not got to overwork it. It's always at this point where you've got to say to yourself, less is more. So I've still got this green gold here, and I've popped on a bit of white gouache. Now, it's either white gouache or Chinese white you want. You just want something a little bit opaque just to work over a little bit over the top. So this is the green gold. I've got my round number 6 and I've just dipped it into the water, then dipped neatly into the green gold paint. So I'm going to pop that stem in. That's instantly going to make it feel like it's going to shoot forward. And we're not going to do anything else with these background flowers. We're just going to keep it really to this front allium flower now. So the background's done. We're just going to do a little bit towards the front. So I am going to pop, just so that you've got that sense of distance, a couple of leaves in here. So this is still the green gold, just with my brush loaded with water. And I'm going to do 2 leaves one side, 1 leaf the other side. So it's just really, again, making it look odd rather than even, and non-uniform really. We don't want it to be creating any sort of pattern. With that you can add a little bit of the turquoise. So this is the turquoise, I've just dabbed into it with the brush, into the neat turquoise, and I'm just going to pop a little bit for some shadow. Shadow or tone. Just needs a little bit of something on there. I can choose one side of the stem. Just run a bit of the turquoise down there as well. It's wet enough to still blend a little bit. If it's not blending, then you can take a little bit more paint on. With this area you can get away with taking just a little bit of water on as well. That's just a little bit of water just to help that blend there. Right, clean my brush off. And then I'm going to dab into the green gold and a bit of this either Chinese white or white gouache. So we're going to get that nice little sort of greeny yellow centre, and we're going to do a few of these but not many. So we're going to dot on. The temptation to do loads of these now is always great, but it won't do you any favours to do that. So randomly dot a few on. You tend to not be able to see the centres as it comes further out anyway. Rinse my brush off, there are those centres. I'm going to dab into the cobalt violet, and again a little bit of either the Chinese white or gouache, the white gouache. I'm just giving this a good mix. And they can start to come on. Just create some of those little star shapes that you get. Just try and loosen this paint up a little bit. That's better. Paint is slightly dried up on the palette, so I've just loosened it up with a little bit of water, and so it's just like a little flick, and you're thinking 5-point star. Come over the stem a little bit, that helps to put the stem into the background. If when you're doing this it's not covering, then you can go darker. Darker will always cover. We've got these 5 points. And we're just basically moving around those dots that we've popped there, and we will overlap some of these petals. And you'll start to see that we're going to build up a little bit of depth. Some of them can have 6, that one's had 6. You've just got to make that every single one of them look slightly different. So you'll notice that every single one is different. They've not formed any sort of pattern there, and I don't want them to. I'm going to pop another one just in here. And then we're going to carry on popping in a few more little random flicks. It's the only way I can describe it, little random flicks. And I do not want you to cover the whole of that background. That background is beautiful, so we're going to keep showing quite a lot of that. These little random flicks, and I'm mixing now with the Windsor Violet and the Cobalt Violet together, so they're getting a little bit darker, and I'm still using my round number 6. I'm just popping a few on. So I've got a nice mixture, and actually can have some coming out, go further. It's like a little V I'm doing in all different directions. I'm going to rinse that brush off. I'm going to pick up a long thin brush now. So this one is a rigger. I'm just going to mix into those purples, and you can take a little bit of your white in as well. So I've got both purples there mixing, and I'm just going to start to bring through the little stemmy bits. So to each one of these little flicky bits, I've got now a little stemmy bit. You can have some stemmy bits without flicky bits as well. This is just building up that final layer. Just remember, you want to see what's underneath. You don't want to eliminate all of that. That lovely softness, we're keeping that there. So I can do a few fine flicky bits, long stemmy bits. And that's working really nicely. So the last thing I can do is to spritz. So I've got a water spritzer here. It's a little bottle of water spritzer, and I'm just going to spritz on top of that just to soften it in. It's not going to move the paint that's dried, but it can soften in some of these edges. So some of the ones I've done have already softened. I can add a few more to soften in. And it's just giving that extra sense of softness and fuzziness which you get with an allium. Just going to spritz that a little bit at the top, because That one needs a... If something's really obvious and you don't want it to stand out, then you just got to work it a little bit with a brush. So that one's a bit obvious there, so I'm just going to blend that in a little bit. Okay, so there's also something else you can do just to lift out a little bit more light again if you feel you've lost some, and that is to just wet little bits and dab them out. So if you've lost a little bit of the centres of an allium, you can dab a few out. If you've lost some of the light of the stems, this is just water on a brush that I'm just painting over. So as I've dried this, it's spread a little bit, so I can just pop some stems back in. Some little flicky bits, but in the light. Sometimes it can be harder for papers for this to happen, sometimes it's easier, so it just depends on the paper really, how much sizing is on that paper. But usually you can keep going over it with a bit of water and it will lift eventually. Just get a few little bits of light back if you've lost a bit. So I'm just adding those in now, just little flecks. You can have a few little lighter stems. Just having a clean tissue to hand or a bit of kitchen towel. Just running through and dabbing off. You just get those little bits of light back. Okay,